This, as you know, is the last is our last meeting of the term, but we will be back next term as well for at least another 3 meetings, maybe more, before possibly some other events in April in person as well. Today, as you all know, we have a very exciting event coming up. This is our talk by our speaker, Professor Rita Lucarelli from UC Berkeley. Professor Lucarelli is a scholar of ancient Egypt, educated at the University of Leiden. She was a researcher at the University of Bonn, I believe, before arriving at Berkeley in 2014. She is the author of many important studies and papers. Those of you interested in the topic, I particularly commend to you her edited volume, The Oxford Handbook of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which contains a number of very interesting and very useful essays on a topic that many of you will have heard of, but is always which always repays further reading because of its importance. Today, she's going to be talking to us on the topic of VR, and just to give you a heads up for any CUHK students, remember, of course, we have our wonderful VR studio down in the makerspace, so on the sort of lower ground floor of our library. So while you're listening to Professor Lucarelli's presentation, do bear in mind that this is something that you too can be involved in potentially as well. Anyway, without further ado then, I'll pass the virtual mic over to our speaker, Professor Lucarelli. Rita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stuart, and hi everyone. Well, good morning to you. Here is 8 p.m. And I'm very happy anyway to be here. I wish to thank, of course, Professor McManus and his team from the Chinese University of Hong Kong for the opportunity to speak to you about my project that is called The Book of the Dead in 3D. And indeed, I will introduce you first to what I do in 3D, what are those Egyptian coffins, and how I annotate them in 3D. And then in the second part of the talk, I will tell you about the second stage of this project, which is connected to the headsets that I'm happy you can use at your university, and the application of virtual reality for the study recontextualizations of those objects. And of course, I'm then happy to take any questions in case there's something that is not clear, or you want more Egyptological background about the objects I will be talking about. So I'll share my screen. Okay, all right, so now this should be on. Well, I will start to say that, to speak about what we call digital revolution. What is digital revolution? Is intended as explosion of information technology. It's not new. It started in the 50s, but we may say that it's been reshaping the whole world. So not only academia, the arts and culture, but also the economics in general, society. And it's also thanks to this digital revolution that the application of digital technologies to the study and to the preservation of cultural heritage has been progressing very quickly. In particular, the digitization of artifacts through 3D visualizations and the advancement of softwares for photogrammetry have provided new tools and inspired new approaches for the study of different categories of artifacts and their contextualization also within museum environments. And the material culture of ancient Egypt constitutes one of the best preserved and most robust archaeological corpora that survive to us from antiquity, and is also one of the most popular avenues for public engagement with humanities, considering that ancient Egypt is very much loved in all the world. And one of the courses I teach in Berkeley is a course of Egyptomania, indeed, because I also speak now of digital Egyptomania. If you go on Sketchfab on the internet, you will find a lot of 3D models of Egyptian artifacts, because indeed Egypt, it's still ancient Egypt, and its cultural artistic production is so much loved. Unfortunately, widespread looting in Egypt itself, also the scattering of pre-1970 finds among different institutions, also inaccessible excavated material, art market, all these really limit public access and limit the study of the ancient Egyptian artifacts. And this is why it's so important actually to conserve, document, and disseminate Egyptian material broadly, trying to indeed repair to this lack of information that we had for so long. And so digital initiative, including 3D modeling of objects and architectural spaces, but also what we call digital epigraphy, so the digitization of inscriptions, also the creation of databases. All those are very promising tools for the conservation and the study of the ancient world, and in particular of ancient Egypt. And we have a lot of object-oriented database technologies that are really important for identify and track looted objects, which still appear too often on the antiquities market. And so the importance of digitization of the ancient Egyptian heritage is very clear. Many Egyptologists, not only me, have... Oh, I think he has the mic on, maybe needs to be, okay. So many Egyptologists indeed now are digitizing artifacts, especially in 3D on Sketchfab. You see here a screenshot from my colleague David Anderson, who is also president of the American Research Center in Egypt, who is one of the new digital archaeologists. On his website, on his page on Sketchfab, you'll find a lot of really nice models. And so we have a lot of digitization indeed of objects, but also very important became the digitization of archaeological spaces where the monuments and the objects are particularly found. We have here is an example of my colleague Elaine Sullivan from the University of California, Santa Cruz, who has recently published an whole book digitized and interactive with the 3D models of the site of Saqqara, where we will see the tomb of certain Psamtek is found, and this is the site also we used for the VR app when we brought back the sarcophagus of Psamtek from the museum to the tomb. But we will talk about this later on. Those visualizations of monuments and archaeological sites allow a recontextualization of each of them in a large landscape, and so they provide also a better engagement of the viewer in the space. And this was the aim of Ellen Sullivan's monograph from 2020 that you can find at the web address on the screen, accessible, completely open access, completely free. And that's another important feature of digitizing material and sites. All this should be available, accessible, possibly without having to pay any fee to access the digital publications. And so when we talk about all these 3D models of objects, of monuments, we could say, I like to say that each 3D model becomes a new medium. An object of study in itself, where the annotations, we will talk about annotated 3D models, function as a tool of understanding and of scholarly and educational interaction between the user and the model's creator. And so by adding annotations directly on the product, one can highlight and explain key points of interest, and so engaging the user, creating a dialogue in order to explain what one is seeing. So a 3D model in itself is not an educational as long as it doesn't contain what we call metadata, so information about that object. And today I will show you examples of annotated coffins from ancient Egypt, which are part of 3D project, my main project, which I coordinate, which is made by students, graduate students, but also now undergraduate students, mainly of the University of California in Berkeley, but we have also external collaborators from Egypt, from other countries, and IT staff, also international. For instance, I have to here mention Markian Nederoff from St. Andrews University in Scotland, where who worked a lot about the visualizations of those coffins, and you'll see more of those. And what the Book of the Dead in 3D does is applying the photogrammetry to the study of ancient Egyptian coffins in order to realize annotated visualization of the coffin and of their decoration. And the decoration of these coffins consists mainly in text and iconography taken from the so-called ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. And we will return on what is the Book of the Dead. For now, let's say that is a corpus, a collection of magical texts, magical spells, complemented by images, and they were intended as a tool of protection for the deceased. It's a collection of funerary texts that had long traditions from the 3rd millennium BC, when they were called pyramid text, to the 1st millennium BC, when it became the so-called Book of the Dead. And so until now, we have produced about 20 models. Some more are coming. It's a small project indeed, because it's still, let's say, local, although the intention is to opening up and make more models of coffins, especially in minor museums, minor collections, where there are coffins that are still not known, not published, and where there is no space to exhibit the original coffin in the museum. So many small museums, like the one where I work as faculty curator, the Museum of Anthropology, Hearst Museum of Anthropology in Berkeley, has a very small gallery. So many of the coffins are indeed in the storage rooms. And the coffins are important in ancient Egypt because they were essential for the Egyptians to protect the body, the mummified body. Probably you all know that in ancient Egypt, the mummification was very important to keep the body of the dead intact was necessary for the spiritual part of the deceased to travel in the afterlife, in the what they call duat, the ancient Egyptian netherworld, because the final aim was basically going through this journey and become a god, so become eternal as a god. But in order to do that, the body has to be protected, and it was protected in those decorated coffins, coffin decorated with magical spells of protection. And so, as I said, for this we used the photogrammetry. And many of the coffins and sarcophagi, so the coffins are in wood, sarcophagi is what when we call sarcophagi when they are in stone. They were removed from Egypt as a consequence of a legal distribution of finds from foreign excavation projects. And so many of them were also actually stolen from cemeteries during the 17th to the early 20th century, and then they were sold on the antiquity markets to museums, to private collectors. And so for many of these coffins, we also don't have the real exact provenance or the contextual information, because indeed they were stolen and sold. So we have to try to find where is the original tomb. So we look at the type of coffin that we have, the type of decoration. We recognize some workshops. We read the text to see if there is the name of the owner, and try to connect the name of the owner at a certain period, and so on. So we reconstruct, let's say, the life and afterlife of those coffins. And the focus of my project is to create also interactive in annotations on the 3D models of the coffins, in particular providing text transcription and translation of the magical spells and other inscriptions that we find outside of the outer part, but also in the inner part of the coffin. And I show you the next slide. You will note different language here. We have translated the whole website in Arabic. Why? Because, well, this is the ancient Egyptian heritage. So we think it is important that people in Egypt can access easily the website, and definitely to have a version in Arabic will facilitate many Egyptians to check contents on the website. And so I was fortunate to work with Egyptian colleagues and PhD students who helped me to translate the text, as well as with Jason Silvestri, one of my graduate students who is very fluent in Arabic. And what I say to my students of Egyptology is that it's important, in order to work with Egyptian material or to work in Egypt, to know the language of the place. Of course, ideal would be to have the website translated in more than one language. So beside Arabic, it would be great to have even Chinese or other different languages, but of course this requires more time and more collaborations, but maybe later on. And as I said, so it's a project for whom I mainly employ students, and you can see here two of my students who are busy photographing a coffin. This was from a museum, the Museum of Man in San Diego, so in South California. We went out also from Berkeley, so we have coffins from San Diego, from San Francisco, and others also out of state. But this, as you see from the details, this was a particularly beautiful coffin for the sort of preservation. You see the green very visible, the images, the text. And so what you do in photogrammetry is indeed taking different photos all around the coffin, ideally also on the bottom. So you have to have also the staff to move the coffin and make sure that you can photograph the entire object as well as inside, because often there is decoration also inside. And then you can realize that. And as I say, coffins were medium for magical spells and images. And when we see them in museums, generally they are placed, if you note that, if you've been in some museum with Egyptian collections, you will see very often coffins are standing. And many of these coffins, especially those produced in the first millennium BC, they are called anthropoid coffins. So they have the shape of the person whose body is inside, female or male. And so they have this anthropoid coffin and anthropoid form, and so standing, it seems almost like alive, right? But we have to remember that in the tomb, they weren't placed vertically, but horizontally. The body was lying down. What we see generally in museum galleries, like at the Metropolitan, which has a beautiful, huge room only filled with coffins, is instead a different sort of more old style kind of exhibition. And what you notice is that those coffins are behind glasses, so the visitor can look at the front, at the lid of the coffin. But what is missing is a better view, a complete view in which you can see the coffin also from the back or inside or from the side. And so this is where digital 3D models help. Those models help to visualize the coffins completely. And so, for example, one of the coffins we realized in 3D, how this is just a screenshot, but you can flip around the model, so you can look at all the details as if you have it in your hands, right? So it's not like looking at the coffin in a museum where it's standing and you miss part of it. You can do with the photogrammetry and then with different software is also recompose coffin ensembles. What are coffin ensembles? The Egyptians were so obsessed with protecting the mummified body that very often we don't find just one coffin, but 2 or 3 coffins, what we call inner coffin, outer coffin, outer coffin. Sometimes a stone sarcophagus containing 2 wooden coffins. And for instance, we found in the storage rooms of the Fieberhurst Museum of Anthropology in Berkeley, those 2 coffins that were kept separated, but we could see that they went together. They were originally together because the name on the coffin of the owner was the same, the style was the same, and also the measures, they fit together. So beautiful inner coffin, we could digitally place it back in the outer coffin. Of course, in reality, those 2 are not together, but at least you have a better view of how it was before the tomb was open and those taken apart. And inside, of course, there is also the mummified body. In my project, I decided not to digitize the mummified body, and you're maybe aware that there is a lot of debates about exhibiting human remains. For my project, anyway, I don't see any benefit of digitizing the mummified body because my focus is on the decoration, so on the Book of the Dead spells, mainly, that you find on these coffins, or the religious iconography that is connected to that. And here is another beautiful coffin from our project that belongs to a woman. Humanities was her name. And this was a coffin that was brought to Berkeley back from Egypt in 1903. And we didn't find a mummified body. So we don't know where the body is. That's what happened when indeed they were taking all these coffins and the mummified bodies out from the tombs in Egypt. We suspect that because of the name, the titles connected to Amenirdes, she probably was a lady living in the south of Egypt, Thebes, modern Luxor, during what we call the 25th, 26th dynasty, so at the end of the pharaonic period. Amenirdes' name is indeed common at that time. What you can, when you do a 3D model and you create first the texture of the model, this helps a lot also to see how the ancient Egyptian artist was working. And so you see the difference also in this beautiful piece of art before and after the coffin was painted. And what we like about this coffin of Amenirdes is this smirk, this sort of really curious, almost a smile in the face that you can see already before painting, and then becomes more less evident, I would say, with the painting. Another example is this other coffin that was all decorated in black and yellow, and actually the face was gilded, right? So it's what we call a gilded face with elements of gold. And we call those black and yellow coffins indeed. And you see the difference in the face, right? The face of the deceased as represented on the lid of the coffins before the decoration was placed in. Talking about the Book of the Dead, what is the Book of the Dead? Probably the name for you as first association, the movie of the Mummy, where the whole series of movies on the mummies, but the first one, the one of 1999, you see the Book of the Dead represented as a book that you open and then you see the magical spells. But in fact, the Book of the Dead in ancient Egypt wasn't really a book, was a collection of spells that you can find on papyrus, but also on other kind of media. Indeed, the Book of the Dead itself as a name is a constructed conventional name given by Egyptologists, but the Egyptians called this collection Peret Emheru, going out by day. Of course, the day is the new day after death, so it's a sort of rebirth, right? I don't like to use the term resurrection, but it's to be reborn to a new life. And we find the Book of the Dead on papyri, and those are it's the most famous Book of the Dead are on papyrus, but we have spells of the Book of the Dead also on statuettes, so-called the shaptis, on amulets like scarabs, mummy bandages. Here is a rounded one that was protecting the head. And all those spells have been translated already in the 1900s. And you can find now translations of the Book of the Dead very easily. Still, the most popular one is the one of Wallis Budge, which is a very old one, and you see less than $10 on the internet. This is keeps being reprinted, although it's not a scientific considered scientific translation anymore, because since Budges published it, we've been studying and understanding much more of the ancient Egyptian language. Budge, of course, did a great job, and we still work on his facsimiles, like the one of the papyrus of Ani that he produced. a more modern translation, for instance, are those of Faulkner and Quirk that we use today to study the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. All these translations are based on the versions of the spells found on papyrus. So the study of the Book of the Dead is based mainly on papyri, while the spells that are attested on coffins are hardly studied. That's also why I wanted to focus on the coffins, because I thought this was still very important. And my work on the Book of the Dead started a long time ago now, back in 2000 to 2014. I've been working on the Book of the Dead, and in particular in Bonn at the so-called Book of the Dead project, which is now closed, but it's been digitized. Here you see me with my colleague Markus Müller. What we did in this project was looking for fragments of Book of the Dead, mostly manuscripts, but not only, so collecting photographs from all over the world, traveling a lot also to find fragments, trying to recompose the puzzle of fragments scattered in different places, but belonging to the same papyrus. And so the result is now online in this website, Totem Book. The website is in German, but Google Translate can translate now almost everything. So that's still accessible. You can log in, register, and also access all the photos. We collected more than 4,000 photos that were all analyzed. And so you can look for the spells here and see, for instance, a certain spell in how many papyri it appears, how many coffins, and so on. And this is how Egyptologists work on Book of the Dead text. Basically, since all those spells, we know 190 now, are attested on different papyri and other media, we have variants of the spells. So the variants of the same spells are copied and compared, so that we can see what is the best version of it. So this is a philological method that is taken actually from classical studies, from classical philology, that has been adopted then also in Egyptology. What happens, this is very useful, of course, to understand the text. What happens is that in this, we cannot visualize where each of these variant is attested. So what you miss is, in the end, the materiality of the text. And indeed, the Book of the Dead, I like to consider the Book of the Dead as a sort of religious thing. So there is a sort of materiality of the Book of the Dead, that is how the text is connected to the medium, the writing support. So a text that is all written around a little statue is different from a text of papyrus, and different from a text of coffin. So if you study the text on a facsimile, flat in a 2D, you cannot see as much as if you study the text from the object itself. So the 3D model help also the analysis of this text. And as you can see this from this image, I ask my students, when I ask my students, what do you think is this? Some of them say, oh, this must be a papyrus, because it looks like a papyrus written in columns. But in fact, this is a zoom image I took from, this is not a great image, but those are textualized coffins. So those are coffins produced in the first millennium BC in Thebes, completely covered with text, with spells. So how do you study these spells? The 3D model, annotated 3D models, it's a great way to study this text without losing the relationship with the object. And what we use was is the Agisoft metadata software to create those models. Was called first PhotoScan. Basically, it's very intelligent software that elaborates all the photos that you took from a coffin, and so it works. There is a whole data processing flow, color correction, alignment, texturing, the reconstruction, so that at the end you can have a full model, of high quality model. The problem is, of course, how are we going to share those models? And what we did was to create shareable version also in PDF. So if you actually go on the website of the project, you can download the PDF. Now, Adobe Acrobat also offers visualization in 3D. So that's what you can do, or just enjoy it from the website. And you see the nice thing, indeed, you're not in a museum, you can flip around, you can almost experience your sarcophagus differently and more in full. And these are all the 3D models that then we annotated. So you see here an example of annotating hieroglyphic text, how it works. In this case, the spell was only in the lower part of the coffin. And so what we have is we transcribe the hieroglyphs. We add what we call transliteration. So the way ancient Egyptian was pronounced. Here, it's if you don't know it, it's a bit difficult to pronounce, but it sounds like Jed Medu in Wenti. So I use those texts also in class for classes on ancient Egyptian language, for instance. And what kind of information you want to give with the annotations? Of course, you also want to give a context, say where this sarcophagus is from, who are the persons that are mentioned on the sarcophagus. Also, then you look, of course, to names of gods, of people. Then you can look at the text completely, and so you basically individuate the part of the coffin with the text, and then you look at also each word. So we added the vocabulary, for instance, that would be useful for students who are starting to learn Egyptian. So we don't have time today to look more carefully to all those models and the translations, but if you want to have fun with the website, of course, just go on it, 3dcoffins.edu, and you can play with the models. And I'm always happy, by the way, for to receive feedback if you find it easily to use, if you think you can learn from it, and one of you has some knowledge of ancient Egyptian arts and religion, and maybe find in these annotations some useful material. So here there were more examples also for the text. You see how you can scroll down. I created just these screenshots to show better how those annotations work. And we will look at the text itself later, because what you're seeing now is the model of the first case study of this project, the sarcophagus of Samtek. That is also the sarcophagus that we use for the virtual reality app. So we brought back this sarcophagus to the tomb. We could do that because it's one of those pieces, luckily, of which we know the archaeological provenance. So we know where is the tomb of Samtek, the name of this deceased. And so, yeah, here I example indeed how you visualize the text, and the very high quality also of these visualizations, photogrammetry. Okay, this is how, just to show the same coffins, our sarcophagus, how it has been studied before. There was just a short publication. He's called the doctor because one of his titles is Sunu. In ancient Egyptian, it means the doctor. And in ancient Egypt, Sunu were not just doctors, but they were also high officials. Indeed, Psamtek was an high official who lived in near Cairo, around in the 26th dynasty, and we found the tomb empty, so there was no mummified body of Psamtek. It seems like the tomb was never used, was ready, but the body of Psamtek didn't make it there. Everything was ready, but maybe he died in a battle. And before our project, this is how the facsimile of the text was realized and studied. So I'm now publishing the full translation, a new translation of this text, which is a magical text. It's a combination of magical spells that were used, especially in this period. So we are around 600 BC. Okay, and you can see also how images of gods are completely embedded in the text, because in the hieroglyphic writing anyway, the image is also writing, right? So we have the so-called determinatives determining what kind of name are mentioned. In this case, those represent the names of the gods mentioned on the sarcophagus. So now what we do with that, if we want to bring those 3D visualization to another level, we can use annotations also in a virtual reality environment. And this is what we did with the sarcophagus of Psamtek. And so the new phase of the Book of the Dead project, or better, a continuation of the Book of the Dead project, is indeed the one of that we called Return to the Tomb. So a reimagining of the sarcophagus of Psamtek, and now also another one of Padinese, reimagining the sarcophagi in the tomb. And I like to talk in this case of virtual traveling. So we talk about virtual reality, but virtual reality is a virtual traveling in the sense that we let the sarcophagus traveling back home, returning home, and going back home is important part also of a lot of travel literature, for instance. And what is home for the sarcophagus? It's indeed the tomb. And by the way, this is a basalt inner sarcophagus is 2 tons heavy, very heavy. It was taken from the tomb and brought in Berkeley by boat in 1900. Then the tomb was excavated also in that period by Alexandre Barsanti, Gaston Maspero, French Egyptologists who were working in Egypt at the time, at the first Supreme Council of Antiquities. How we did that, how we brought back the sarcophagus in the tomb. And by the way, I started this project supported by CITRIS, the CITRIS Institute in Berkeley, together with Ellen Sullivan. And now 2 more colleagues have joined, Ayman El-Geweli from Virginia Tech and Matthias Lang from Bonn University. So we expanded now the project internationally. What we want to do is reconstruct, in order to virtually replace the sarcophagus in its original context, we have to go from one phase to the other, one reconstruction to the other. We start from the landscape, so reconstructing the landscape, in this case, the cemetery of Saqqara near Cairo, then reconstructing the tomb, and then placing the object, which is the sarcophagus, back in the tomb, and look at the text, so having annotations. And all this can be then visualized through, right now, through the Oculus, but also the Vive headsets. Our aim will be to have this app available also without the headset, because not everyone can really enjoy the full immersive experience. And indeed, we have experienced also students who and other users that who get really sick by entering the tomb in VR. since this tomb is actually a shaft tomb and it's like 30 meters deep. I was fortunate to go in the tomb last October when I was in Egypt, and indeed the experience is also, when it's not in VR, it's really, really strong. So I'll show you some images and then a demo of this app. This is a photo of this pyramid of Unas that, as you see, is not one of the best intact pyramids, but it's the one of the pyramids of the 5th dynasty where we found the first text, magical text, the pyramid text. And the tomb of Psamtek is right on the on one of the sides of this pyramid. This is a photo of the tomb that was kindly provided by my colleague Ramadan Hussein, and unfortunately he passed away while he was working at reproducing, studying the tomb. And so now we joined his team from Tübingen University in Germany to reconstruct also the decoration of the tomb in the VR app. So this is what we've been reconstructing. As you can see, the tomb is very small. In the section, you could see the shaft, 30 meters deep, and then this small burial chamber where you can see where the sarcophagus were placed. And the sarcophagus lid in Berkeley is not the outer sarcophagus, actually. There was inside, probably there was a wooden one. Outside, there was another sarcophagus, a bigger one, which you can see here. So in order to reproduce virtually the tomb, we had to also scale everything, measure the old tomb. We use excavation reports until we could really see the original and connect to the mission that is working in the tomb. We are hunting for objects that were originally in this tomb that now are mostly in Cairo Museum, but not very well documented. We found the shaptis, so these little statuettes, and so-called canopus jar that were containing some of the organs of the deceased mummies, of the deceased body. So this is just an image to show you. We had a crowdfunding campaign to bring back this sarcophagus in the museum because it was first kept in a storage room. Just some images to see how then it was placed in the galleries. Now the galleries are still closed. They closed during COVID. And then we had other difficulties to open, but should be open soon, probably in spring. And this is, I see time is flying, but to give you an idea of the text of the sarcophagus, is about protection of Psamtek, invocation of gods like Osiris, Horus, Nut, the goddess of the sky, and all the gods are asked to protect Psamtek, to make sure that he can be protected from all evil things. And so what is the goal of this VR? Contextualizing the sarcophagus in Saqqara, and so exploring multiple scale, as I say, the landscape, the tomb, and the sarcophagus. And so I have some clips to show.
Welcome to the ancient Saqqara.
There was already, I think you can listen to the sound. If not, let me know. But this is just a demo to show you the first version of this app. There's still not much texture of the necropolis, but you have to imagine having the Oculus and
Welcome to the ancient Saqqara necropolis.
You're right.
Saqqara was an important cemetery site that stood in the high desert west of the city of Memphis, a religious, economic, and political center. Elite and royal Egyptians used Saqqara as a burial ground for hundreds of years, from Egypt's Dynasty I at the beginning of the state through the end of the Pharaonic period, many centuries later. It is the 26th dynasty, otherwise known as the Saite period, 664 to 525 BCE, when high officials and families of the elite from the now state capital Sais wanted to be buried near the pyramids of the powerful pharaohs of the past. For example, the famous step pyramid of Djoser, or the pyramid of King Unas, both built more than 1,500 years before the Saite period. Look around the necropolis. In addition to the huge royal pyramids, you will notice white rectangular tombs called mastabas, which marked the burials of Old Kingdom elites, as well as small temple tombs used mostly by New Kingdom officials. '26th dynasty shaft tombs were often designed with a long, narrow shaft dug into the ground, ending in a burial chamber. Psamtik's tomb shaft extended more than 25 meters deep into the rock of the Saqqara Plateau. After the burial chamber was built and in place, the shaft was filled with sand to make the tomb inaccessible.
So this was one of the first attempts to recreate the tomb. Now is much better than that, but I wanted to show you how we started it. And so the voices of my colleagues, my colleague Ellen Sullivan, we created a narrative to introduce the user, and this should be available to anyone who also know nothing about Saqqara, the necropolis, all the information should be in the app. Of course, if you already know everything about it, you don't have to listen.
Welcome to the ancient.
And so we used the visualization of Saqqara that Ellen Sullivan already made for her book, and then we integrated the model of the sarcophagus, and there was the work I did with my students in Berkeley, especially, and so we talked a lot about integrating funerary objects in ancient cemetery context. How that is useful. So embedding the object in a historical place and time, signaling that the object was one part of a complex series of funerary practices, reimagining details of the original placement of the object, not apparent to the museum visitors. And of course, this needs to be populated with more. We were thinking also adding human presence, voices, sounds, of course, more texture that is still missing because we still have to work on it, while also the visualization of the tomb still miss the decoration. So, but at least we have it scaled and available. So these are all screenshots taken while creating the app. And so I think this is the next, in this clip, you can see also, you can decide how to enter the tomb if you want to see the pillars covering the sarcophagus or not. We were trying first to fly down the tomb, but that provoked really this sort of sickness. And so right now the user is a sort of ghost going through the walls and entering the tomb. And still some screenshots and little videos to see all the work that has been made with the software we use for this Unity. We would like to switch now to another software, but this is still in the making. Unity was anyways useful, and in order to format and adapt the 3D model in Unity, we use Blender. And so it's the team of my students at UC Berkeley that work on this, and Jessica Johnson is in my program of Egyptology, but other students were not. They were computer data science students like Nick Yerasi and others who did a great job, while the team of Santa Cruz was working more on the visualization of the tomb. So this is, you see, a screenshot from Blender. It's a project, this kind of projects, I think is really successful with students and digital natives. So students who know how to use this technology better than me, because they're born with it. You see here the students with the original sarcophagus also trying to measure and you know, think about readapting it then in 3D for the reconstruction of the tomb. And I really like the screenshots. I mean, when all this was processing, the visualizations are really great one. So I'll go a bit faster, but this was also try out with Chris Kane, Chris Reed, that were, you know, try out, see, okay, how can we do that? So we imagine they had the headset and the handset to try to see if they can virtually touch the sarcophagus to visualize then the annotations. And these were, okay, we're almost out of time, so I'll skip some. As I say, we want to add more. So from virtual reality, we could talk about augmented reality, adding human experience, recreating sounds, activities taking place in a tomb. This has been done. For instance, if you check the website of Digital Giza, it's a project of my colleagues, Peter Dermanuelian, who is one of the first digital Egyptologists, especially in the US. He did a lot reconstructing all Giza, and he reconstructed also rituals that were happening in the necropolis of Giza, like the famous ritual of opening the mouth. So he added the human presence. This kind of animation are also really popular in games inspired to ancient Egypt. So gaming is another dimension that can be important. And so maybe some of you know Assassin's Creed's origin, where the assassin indeed goes around in ancient Egypt, and this has been reconstructed with a lot of augmented reality and visualizations that do not, however, represent what was in Egypt at that time. There is a lot of reconstruction, right? So the question to ask ourselves is, what are we reconstructing? Are we reconstructing what another digital archaeologist, a colleague of mine from the University of Duke in Durham, called potential past, Maurizio Forte? Is this the potential past? Is really how the past was, or is a non-real past, is even a hyper-real past? With this kind of technology visualization, we can completely take an object and transform it. And I really like this image that really show this shift that we could have between real, virtually real, and hyper-real, right? And so as students, scholars, we don't want the hyper-real, definitely. We want to stick to the real. So have reconstructions that are as much as possible sticking to the original. So this was a little video of how.
Welcome to the ancient Saqqara necropolis.
I'll go faster. How is the app right now? We are working at the texture, as I say, of the necropolis and the tomb. We added some sound. We're working better with the annotations. You see, you can highlight the text and click on it, and then you can read the translation, understand what is it. That while really looking on the book, feel like you're there, basically. And well, stay tuned. There will be many more.
Thank you for visiting the tomb of Psamtik at Saqqara. We hope you enjoyed your journey.
So I hope to be able to share this. Actually, there is already a demo version on GitHub that I'm happy to share if someone wants to experience it. We are expanding the project now to another tomb, the one of Padinesit, which is close to Samtek. As you can see, they are connected actually. And we know the sarcophagus of Padinesit, so it would be great to have them both populate the tombs with other objects. Well, I think that's all. I'm happy to take questions. Please visit the website 3D Coffins Berkeley DU is the Book of the Dead in 3D project website. I have a Facebook page devoted to this project, as well as a Sketchfab page where you can enjoy all the 3D models, while the VR app, as I say, is not public yet, but some of you want to experience with the Oculus, I could share then via Professor McManus a version of it. We can maybe talk about that later. And okay, thank you. Ready to any question?
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Lucarelli, for that really, amazing presentation. It's a great way for our seminar to finish the semester, and it connects so wonderfully with all the new resources we have on campus as well. Students and others who are present can obviously type their questions in the chat, and then I'll relay them to the speaker. While you're all thinking and typing, I might sort of ask a couple of opening questions, and then we can go into your questions. So I'll maybe give you sort of two questions to start with. So the first one, I guess, relates to what you spoke about at the end, the kind of the theoretical framework around this kind of gamification and, I guess, realization of historical material. And in one of our classes, we read about, you know, the kind of the empathy element that's supposed to come out of gamification. It sort of gives you, I guess, greater empathy with actors. It brings things to life, literally. And then there's a kind of an emotional element to that. I'm wondering, do you have any kind of personal reflections on this? And then also, I guess on the sort of technical side, I mean, you spoke a little bit about using Blender as your 3D modeling software, and then Unity, as far as I could see. But I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the kind of both the process and where you see the kind of advantages and disadvantages. We teach using SketchUp as opposed to Blender. There are so many resources. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yes, thank you. So for the first question, actually, yes, I've been, I experimented a lot with gamification of ancient Egypt. So games inspired to ancient Egypt. Also in my course of Digital Humanities and Egyptology, I led the students even to explore a few games and critically thinking to which one are educational and ethically also well made, like respecting the ancient people, and which one instead are a complete mystification of ancient Egypt, right? And in a sense, they are more focused on the sensational, on exploiting ancient Egypt. This is connected, of course, to also discourse of decolonizing our view of ancient Egypt and trying to look at ancient Egyptians as people, not just as mummies. And so it becomes very complex when you look at games in which sometimes all those questions are not really taken into consideration, but the aim is always just having fun, right? So having the user having fun, and sometimes in a violent way. So Assassin's Creed, for instance, I is wonderful, but in fact, what you do there is fighting, killing. And it's interesting that they did an educational version of that game where there's no fight. That was instead to travel through ancient Egypt. And they had an Egyptologist advising them for the reconstructions of all the monuments in a certain time, Ptolemaic Egypt. The fact is, I think the educational version wasn't really successful. In the end, people wanted the fighting version. Even well, my daughter, we have the PS4 still, the older one, but that was this version was for PS4. She was bored without the fighting, right? So then the question is, okay, can you really use gaming for educational purposes or not? It's still an open question. I think it's very difficult anyway to combine the two, gaming and educational. It requires collaborative effort, making sure that you have indeed scholars and IT experts that can join forces and make sure that everything works in this reconstruction of the past and the fun entertainment part, and not exploiting what is the scientific section or feature of this reconstruction. I think it was strange enough when I was looking for on the Oculus platform about also VR apps about ancient Egypt. So not even real games, but mostly apps reconstructing ancient Egypt. There weren't many, as I thought there would have been, and they are all focused always on the same monuments. So you can imagine Tutankhamun or Nefertari, so the famous tombs, what we see as, you know, the Egypt of the wonderful things, the treasure of Egypt. There are no apps or games on what people were doing in ancient Egypt, like daily life in ancient Egypt or non-royal tombs, for instance, right? So we talked with this VR app instead to shift the focus to aspects of the ancient Egyptian culture, funerary religion, and rituals that is not represented today on those platforms, and also not in gaming. So this we were actually very recently discussing about that. As for the technical part, oh, yes, you want?
Yeah, no, I was wondering if I could ask a quick follow-up question, because that's all fascinating. So are other historical periods and places better represented than Egypt, or is this a kind of universal lacuna?
You mean in the games?
Yeah, on the Oculus, that's Meta's platform, isn't it?
Yeah. It's generally it's always New Kingdom Egypt. So it's the time of Tutankhamun, Ramses, Imperial Egypt.
Yeah.
And I see lately there is interest in games that reproduce the ancient past. So from Greece, from other parts of the world. Of course, I looked especially to those about Egypt, but I could see that there is a lot coming, even well, the Assassin's Creed series as now other cultures and regions. So that's interesting. Again, what I noticed that also if they ask a scholar to check about historical facts and representations and the geography, in fact, you can find a lot of stuff that is really not right. So I guess at a certain point they weren't listening all the time to the academic advice, right? It's that's I guess is
It's the same problem in movies, right?
Right.
There's the famous instance of the movie Gladiator. One of my teachers in graduate school, Kathleen Coleman, was the historical consultant for that, or for about 2/3 of it, and then she resigned because as an expert in Roman games and the amphitheater and things like that, it just didn't work for her what they wanted to do. So anyway.
Yeah, so for briefly for the other question, so what I do in the project is basically conceptualize the narrative and the theoretical questions, the what we want to realize and everything. But the most technical part is not really, I'm not really working on that, but I have a team of IT experts. Luckily, I got a lot of support on campus here. And so the VR groups, they are connected to here to what we call research, teaching and learning, have been helping with Unity, because on campus, when I started the app, this was 2 years ago almost, there was this Unity group. So they were working with Unity. But actually right now, so in this, I cannot give you too many technical details, but in the end, it seems like from my colleagues, IT colleagues, what they were suggesting is, and also Ayman El-Geweli from Virginia Tech, who joined, and she's virtual archaeologist, digital archaeologist too. She thinks that we should switch to real capture as a program because it's much faster, and the quality of those visualizations are much better. And probably you know more than me about this. I don't know what you think, if you're if you think Unity is still one of the best one, or what I mean that
it's the most commonly it's the one everyone starts with.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of kind of tutorials available, and a lot of there's a lot of support material around it that's built up over the last couple of years. But I mean what it produces can be a little kind of clunky.
Right. It was
but it's easy to say import, like a Blender or a SketchUp file, and all those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. It's we are kind of still discussing that, but that's the part that, for instance, Ayman and others are working on. Matthias Lang, also from Bonn. They are the technical part of the project. I honestly, I'm trusting them, because although I'm following a bit what the students do, but I'm not really working with the software. And so they were using Blender because it seems like it worked well with Unity. But of course now, so the fear is that if we transport everything to a different out of Unity, we can miss something. Like it's not easy as a process if you don't know how to do it well. And that's why I was hoping to also widen the collaboration with more virtual reality experts to advise more on what is the best solution. So we'll see.
Yeah, and there may be a follow-up question to that, and it relates to one of the questions we've received in the chat, is this question of collaboration. So I guess there's traditional humanities, there's computer science, and then there's kind of digital humanities in between, and everyone falls somewhere across that kind of spectrum. So how is it working within these interdisciplinary environments?
Well, it's working actually really well at UC Berkeley until now, because I could find indeed different specialties and willing to collaborate. I think it's challenging though if you don't have honestly enough funds to hire and pay the different specialties that you need. And that's also what has been slowing us down at the beginning, since I only had seed grants at the very beginning. And so I really had to learn with my students, for instance, to use Metashape at the very beginning. It would have been much faster, of course, if I had someone already skilled in that, but we could not at that time hire anyone. And the same with developing the VR app. So I had my students learning to use Unity from scratch, basically. So this slowed down a lot the process. But I think you cannot have any digital project if not through collaboration. Those are collaborative projects, cannot be individual projects. I don't think one scholar can really do everything. It's too...
No, exactly. And I guess another virtue of that this sort of model of collaboration is that yeah, especially at the beginning, I guess your graduate students learn new skills as well, and you kind of create digital humanists ex
Right.
nihilo. So
yeah. So what we have here is also a program for undergraduate students to work in projects in which they are basically trained. So, and that's what I'm doing. Besides using the project, also the VR app and the 3D project also in the classroom for teaching about ancient Egyptian religion, culture, but also text. So to read the text from the website. So in that sense, it's being very useful.
okay, great. So we have a question here which relates to 3D printing. So you mentioned your sketch fab files. Are you involved in 3D printing at all, or?
So yeah, we were kind of thinking like it would be great to use it for this project. The fact is, if you want to print in real scale, those are huge. Those are huge objects. We tried to have the Samtec sarcophagus. We had the mini version of it. We scale it really small. It's kind of cute, but not really useful, because once you reduce the object, you cannot really look at the details, right? So I think 3D printing works well only when you have small objects. And I have colleagues like Peter Dermanuelian at Harvard, whom I mentioned before. He tried to do 3D printing of statuettes. Works very well. We have to say it's still a very expensive technology. And so a 3D printer, in the end, is not too cheap. And again, it's a question of how many funds you have, how much you can do with that. But for the coffins, to me, doesn't really, I don't have it as a priority, let's say, because it's just there to use. I'm more interested in recreating the coffins in augmented reality. So bring the coffins even in your room, right? So we're having fun, like taking a coffin on the kitchen table, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess that's more like maybe interesting in the sense of I really getting close to the artifact than not printing it.
Okay, so we have a bit more of an Egyptological question here. Questioner asks, Professor Lucarelli, you've mentioned your project doesn't include 3D models of mummies due to ethical concerns. I'd like to know more about the ethical issues relating to 3D modeling. For instance, mummies, Pompeii victims, models of dangerous weapons or a negative heritage, although these may be attractive to a general audience.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a lot of 3D technology used for bodies, human remains, mummified bodies. It's indeed a good question. At the moment, it's really a choice of the museum, of the institution that wants to share those models. In my case, as I said, I don't need the mummified body in 3D because I'm focusing on the decoration. But in certain cases, I must say, to have a 3D model of mummified bodies anyway, very useful for studies of mummification, for study on the also biological studies of pathologies, or to visualize what kind of objects, amulets you find in between the bandages, right? We have, so beside 3D models, we have now real scans of these mummies, mummified bodies, also of animals, for instance. And very often, if you go in a museum, you'll find the original mummified body, and then the scan. For instance, if you go to the Egyptian Museum in Turin, they have now a mummy's room that has the original mummified bodies, and they are exposed with those darkening windows, glass, so that if you don't want to see it, you don't see it, but you have the option. And at the same time, you have the scan of the mummified body, and you see if there were amulets inside, or if some of the body's part suffered any wound or damage. So that can be very useful. But there is a movement that is connected to the fact that indeed Egyptology itself is born as a colonial discipline since the time of the Napoleonic campaign in Egypt, 1799. They were going from Europe. They were arriving in Egypt, opening tombs, looking at the artifacts, at the mummified bodies, bring them back and use them for shows. So unrolling the mummy was a popular show in London, in Victorian London in 1900. Of course, now you don't unroll any mummy anymore, but luckily you have the technology, you can see truth. And so what's idea? The idea would be bring back the mummified bodies to Egypt, put them back in the tomb, because we should not have disturbed the rest of that deceased human. They are humans, they're not just bodies. There's a lot of discussion about that. You cannot bring back everything anymore. There are a lot of debates about that too, and major museums who indeed they try to say, okay, no, we don't give back anything, but we create digital models that are accessible for everyone. So you have this digital heritage available. Of course, not everybody agree, especially in Egypt, that this is enough. They want the original. And indeed, I have an article that is going to be published soon, in which I discuss the idea of the original and the copy. The 3D model is a copy. What's the value of the copy compared to the original? What about this aura of the original, this aura of the original? You want to see the original, but right now we have a lot of digital exhibitions in which everything is reconstructed in a way that it seems real, right? Seems the true one, but it's not. So yeah, a lot of interesting food for thought, I would say.
Sure. And we actually have a question somewhat related to this. The questioner asks, are there any statistics or any sense that your project has attracted more visitors to the museums or sites. So I guess one of the purposes of digitization is often to reduce potential wear and tear to objects being on general display. But I guess it also could go the other way, and whether that's desirable. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the main function, my project is like what we are focusing is objects which are not on display. So the visitor of the museum cannot see because they are in the storage room, and they've never been published either. So we go looking for small museums with small collections, sometimes not even an Egyptian collection, but it's a museum with a couple of coffins scattered there. And so nobody really knows about those, and we make them accessible to the web. So this could be one function. There is also the idea that not everyone can really go to the museum, can physically go to the museum for a question of, it could be different questions, right? Impossibility to travel or to physically go in another space, lack of resources even to go to a museum. And so by digitizing, one can access everything from the computer, doesn't need to physically go there. And I think that's indeed another important function of those digital exhibition or digitization. In my case, as I said, it's mostly go hunting those unknown coffins.
Yeah, great. So we have just 2 minutes left. So I'm wondering if I mean, you have this tremendous series of related ongoing projects. What do you think the sort of the new frontiers are in the field you're working on? If you had infinite money, what would you do?
Oh, wow. Well, I really believe in the accessibility of and shareability of our work. And so I think that the future will be to have open access material. Right now, to have open access, even just a publication, you have to pay, basically,
Yes.
not the publishers pay. But I imagine a world in which really everything is available online for free. And so that would be my aim. And also what I noted by working with VR is that there are still some barriers. Not everyone can access, can enjoy a VR app or a 3D model. So individuals, people with some oh my God, I don't have the term now, but no, the impair.
Visual impairment.
Excuse me.
Visual impairment.
Visual impairment. That's how we, in English, say, or any other physical barriers. They cannot access this kind of work. So how you do with that? I would like to make sure that all our products are accessible for everyone. It's something that even the giants of technology, of course, Google and others here in the Silicon Valley, very close to me, they also discuss a lot. But I don't think in the academia we're doing still enough about that. And so we have all these trendy digital projects, but we should think, okay, what about in terms of accessibility? How people that cannot see or hear can enjoy that, right? So those are the questions I like to solve, and ideally have a future of Egyptology in which everything is accessible.
Absolutely. That's a great sentiment to end on. So yes, it's 1:30 p.m. here. I guess it's 9:30 on the West Coast. So it was great hearing about your exciting work, which I hope will, and I'm sure will only go from strength to strength. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to all our attendees as well.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And please be in touch if you have any other questions by email or check the website. Let me know what you think about it. And if you come to Berkeley, please also be in touch, of course.
Great. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.